I don't know what it is about the way your mind works when you feel like something's off. You can't quite put your finger on it, but you know. That was me one Tuesday night, just standing in the kitchen like an idiot, staring at a piece of paper buried under a stack of old bills. Normally, I wouldn't even bother digging through all that clutter, but something about this felt different. Something was pulling me toward it, like my brain was just screaming at me to look closer. And I did. I pulled it out, thinking maybe it was some random note from Sarah's real estate job. But then I saw it. The handwriting wasn't hers. Not even close. It was messy, rushed, like someone wrote it in a hurry, probably scared they'd be caught. In the middle of the page was a phone number. No name. No explanation. Nothing. Just that number. At first, I tried to shrug it off. Maybe it's a client, I thought. Maybe it's nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. No, this felt like something I needed to know. My gut was already churning, and every second I spent not doing something about it was making it worse. That damn number kept gnawing at the back of my mind. So, I made myself a cup of coffee, put the paper down, and waited. I had to figure out what to do next. I had to know if I was being paranoid or if there was something I should really be worried about. Something told me I wasn't just overthinking things. That evening, after we had dinner, I decided to ask Sarah about it. She was acting like everything was normal, as usual. Her usual routine, sit down, make small talk about the day, but I couldn't shake the feeling. The number was burning a hole in my pocket, and I needed to know if it meant anything. I casually brought it up. Hey, Sarah, I found a number on the counter. A client's. She didn't even look up. Yeah, probably. I get so many of those. It's nothing. That was too quick, too smooth, too rehearsed. The way she said it didn't sit right with me, but I tried to act calm, to keep it cool. I watched her as she cut into her food, keeping her gaze low, never meeting mine. But then, just for a split second, her hand twitched. It was so small, but I saw it. Her grip tightened around the knife, and there was this tiny little shake in her wrist. For a second, I thought I imagined it. But I didn't. She was hiding something. Something big. And that little movement, that was a signal. It told me everything I needed to know. Something wasn't right. I didn't say anything else that night. I just sat there, finishing my meal like everything was fine, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. That twitch was the only thing I could think about. I could feel the suspicion crawling up my spine like a spider. The next few days? They were torture. Every time I looked at her, I saw the cracks in her smile, the way she couldn't quite look me in the eye, the way she'd go quiet when certain names came up. There was this weird tension between us now, something that wasn't there before. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Every little thing was adding up, and it wasn't in my favor. But I had to know for sure. I had to prove it. And so, I started to pay attention. Real attention. Not just the surface stuff, but every small movement, every word, every look. I watched her like a hawk. I started to track her every move, and that's when I saw it. Something was off. And it wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was the truth staring me in the face. You know, sometimes you don't really want to know the truth. You'd rather stay in your little bubble, pretending everything's okay, ignoring the signs. But you can only hide from reality for so long. I kept watching her, kept listening to her excuses and her little slip-ups. But it wasn't until that one night, when she thought she was being slick, that I got the confirmation I was waiting for. It was a Thursday. I'd already started tracking her phone habits, checking who she was texting, when she'd disappear into the bathroom, who she'd talk to in the other room with the door closed. Little things that most people wouldn't notice if they weren't paying attention. But I wasn't most people. I could feel the lies piling up, and I was sick of being in the dark. That night, I got a glimpse of something I wasn't supposed to see. I was just sitting in the living room, pretending to watch some dumb show on Netflix, when she came in, her phone in hand, with this little smile on her face like she'd just won the lottery. She saw me glance up, and she quickly shoved it in her purse, but it was too late. I saw the name. Chris. And I remembered the number from that slip of paper. Chris. That was the guy. The guy she'd been seeing. The one she thought I wouldn't catch. I don't know what she thought was going to happen, but that moment? That moment was the moment I knew for sure. I waited until she went upstairs to change or whatever, and when she was out of sight, I grabbed her purse. My heart was beating out of my chest, but I kept my hands steady. I found her phone buried deep inside, and I unlocked it. She wasn't exactly a genius with her passwords. I went straight to her texts. I knew I wasn't going to like what I was about to see, but I couldn't stop myself. And there it was. Message after message. Chris. Compliments. Plans. Flirty remarks. They had been talking for months. She'd been telling me she was busy at work or out with clients, but she had been with him the whole time. She thought I wouldn't notice the late-night texts or the way she'd always be too tired when I wanted to spend time with her. I felt this tight knot form in my stomach. This was it. The proof. I wasn't crazy. I didn't confront her right away. No, I couldn't do that. If I did, she'd just lie her way out of it, make up some half-assed excuse. And I wasn't about to give her that. I had a plan. I wasn't going to let her twist this around. I sat there, reading through every damn message, feeling my blood boil with each word. The lies, the manipulation, the selfishness. She was so good at playing the perfect wife in front of everyone, but behind closed doors? She was someone else. She had been lying to me, using me. I wasn't just some fool anymore. When she came downstairs, I acted normal. I put the phone back exactly how I found it, and I didn't say a word. She didn't suspect a thing. She was too comfortable in her lies, too used to thinking she had me wrapped around her finger. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I was done being her backup plan. Done being the guy who didn't deserve better. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to get away with this. Not without paying for what she did. And when she realized that, when she realized what I had uncovered, it was going to hit her like a freight train. But not yet. I still needed more. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of thinking she could just walk away from this without facing the consequences. I needed to make sure she felt every bit of the betrayal she had dealt me. Every lie, every stolen moment, every fake apology. She was going to regret it. I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. She'd crossed that line. And now, I was about to make her feel every single thing I was feeling. I didn't rush into anything. I wasn't some impulsive guy, not anymore. I knew this had to be planned out carefully, and I had all the time in the world. I wanted her to feel safe. I wanted her to think that nothing had changed, that she had me under her thumb just like before. The longer I let her get comfortable, the more vulnerable she'd become. It was a week after I'd uncovered the texts. And during that week, I saw Sarah slip back into her usual routine like nothing had happened. She'd go to work, come home, play her little part, and pretend everything was fine. She thought she'd outsmarted me. But what she didn't know was that I was biding my time. Every night, I watched her. Every conversation we had, I was listening, reading between the lines. And little by little, I could feel the power shifting. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about me regaining control. She'd taken that from me. She'd stolen my trust, my loyalty. She'd made me a fool for far too long, and I wasn't going to let her think she could keep doing it. I played the part of the forgiving husband. I listened to her stories about work. I nodded when she made little jokes. I even went to dinner with her once or twice. But every time she touched my arm or smiled at me, I felt nothing. There was no warmth, no affection, just coldness. That was the thing about betrayal. It's like a veil that hangs between you and the person who hurt you. Everything they say, everything they do, is tainted by that knowing. That you know what they've done, and they have no idea that you know. She'd smile, and I'd just think about Chris. And then, one night, everything fell into place. I'd been watching her closely, tracking her every move. I saw how she started texting more, always a little too busy for dinner or coming home late after work drinks. And then it happened. She was supposed to be home by 7, but she called me around 8:30. "Hey babe, I'm going to be late," she said, her voice sounding rushed. "Some clients need me to stay later to wrap up some details on the listing." I wasn't stupid. I knew it was just another lie. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was with him. So I did the one thing I could do. I stayed calm. I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. I just nodded along, even though I knew I was being played. All right, I said, just be careful on the drive home. I will, she replied, a little too eagerly. Love you. Love you too, I said back, but the words felt hollow. She hung up, and I didn't wait long before grabbing my keys. I wasn't going to sit around anymore. I wasn't going to wait for her to come home and lie to my face again. I drove to the restaurant she always went to with him. I didn't have to ask where it was. She'd mentioned it enough times. The place had a nice ambience. She always made it sound like some fancy spot for business dinners. But I knew better. I knew this was where she'd been seeing him, where she'd been pretending I didn't exist. When I got there, I parked across the street. I sat in my car for a good while, watching the front door. And sure enough, about 15 minutes later, there she was. Sarah walked in, looking all prim and proper like she was out with a client. But then, the guy walked in right after her. Chris. The bastard. I could feel my fists tighten against the steering wheel. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. But I didn't get out of the car. Not yet. I needed to let her have her moment. I needed to let her think everything was fine. I watched them through the window, seeing the way she leaned in close to him, laughing at something he said. The chemistry between them was obvious. She was looking at him the way she used to look at me before everything fell apart. And the worst part was that she had no idea I was watching. I waited there for a while, letting the anger boil inside me. And while I watched them, I realized something important. Something that made me cold to the core. This wasn't about love anymore. This wasn't about fixing things or finding a way back to who we were. This was about me. About making her understand what it felt like to lose something. To lose everything. Eventually, they left the restaurant together. I saw them kiss goodbye, like they didn't have a care in the world. Sarah got in her car, and I followed her back to the house. I didn't want to confront her then. No, I had something bigger in mind. Something that would hit her a lot harder than anything I could say. I could feel it in my bones now. The game was almost over, and I was the one in control. The truth was out. She'd done the unforgivable. And now, it was time for her to pay. The drive home that night felt different. I wasn't just driving back from a restaurant. I wasn't just going back to an empty house where my wife was playing her games. No, I was driving towards something else. Something final. It hit me as I turned onto our street. She thought I didn't know. Hell, she probably thought I'd never find out. She was still so sure of herself, still convinced that her lies were airtight, that I was some clueless idiot. But she was wrong. I knew. I had all the pieces. Now, it was time to make her face the truth. And not in some petty emotional confrontation where she could beg and cry and talk her way out of it. No, I needed this to hurt. I needed her to feel every ounce of betrayal I'd felt these past months. I didn't go straight into the house. Instead, I parked down the block, out of sight, and I just sat there for a while. I needed to think, to plan. The anger was still there, burning, but I couldn't let that take over. I had to be smart about this. I'd watched enough crime shows to know that a good plan doesn't just involve catching the person. It involves making them understand the consequences. And Sarah, she needed to understand just how deep she'd dug herself into this hole. I needed to make her feel every little thing she'd done to me. The first step? Setting the stage. The next morning, she'd be going to work, just like any other day. But when she came back, that's when everything would change. I'd already figured out how to get the house to myself. I'd make sure she didn't have anything to distract her. No excuses, no, I'm too tired to talk. I spent the next couple of hours getting things ready. I cleaned up the kitchen, made sure everything was in order, and set the table as if it were a normal night. But it wasn't a normal night. No, I wasn't just setting the table for dinner. I was setting the stage for the truth to be laid bare. When I finished, I stood back for a second and surveyed the room. Everything had to look perfect. It had to look like I was willing to forgive her. Like I was willing to move forward. I wanted her to think that. Because when she walked through that door, when she saw me sitting there, calm and composed, it would all come crashing down. I spent the rest of the day pacing. I couldn't sit still. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity. I was waiting for that moment when she'd walk in, completely oblivious, thinking that she'd somehow won. But she hadn't. She was about to lose everything. By the time she got home, I was ready. She walked in around 6:30, exactly when I expected her. Her heels clicked on the floor as she entered, her voice cheerful. "Hey, babe, I'm home." I didn't look up immediately. I didn't need to. I knew she'd come straight into the kitchen, and sure enough, a few seconds later, I heard the sound of her heels stopping right behind me. I turned around slowly, and there she was. She smiled, her eyes scanning the table. "What's all this? You planning something special?" I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there and looked at her. She was still trying to play the game. Still acting like nothing had changed. Still trying to convince herself that I didn't know. I kept my voice steady. "Sit down, Sarah. We need to talk." She hesitated, just for a second, but then she pulled out a chair and sat down, her face shifting from playful to slightly nervous. She could feel it now. Something wasn't right. But she had no idea what was coming. "So what's this about?" she asked, her eyes flicking nervously around the room. I kept my tone casual, too casual. I didn't want to rush this. I wanted her to stew in her own unease for just a little bit longer. "I think you know exactly what this is about." I said it matter-of-factly, like we were talking about the weather. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Her smile faltered. She opened her mouth, but then stopped herself, biting her lip. For a second, she looked like she might actually confess, but she didn't. She couldn't. It wasn't in her nature. I didn't give her the chance to speak. I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of this. I wanted her to feel every moment of discomfort, every ounce of guilt that had been building up inside me since the day I found that number on the counter. I pulled out my phone, placed it on the table, and slid it across to her. Her eyes locked onto it, and I saw her face go pale. There was nothing on the screen except the text thread between her and Chris. Every message, every lie, every moment she'd shared with him while she was pretending to love me. I let her read it, and I didn't say a word. The silence between us was heavy, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something, power. She was the one on the defensive now. She was the one who couldn't speak. After what felt like forever, she finally looked up at me, her face full of panic. I can explain," she stammered. I didn't let her. I stood up slowly and took a deep breath. "No. You can't explain. There's nothing to explain." She tried again, her voice desperate now. "I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I never meant to hurt you." The words didn't mean anything anymore. They were just more lies, more empty promises. I let her stew in that silence a little longer. The silence of realization. Of knowing that she was trapped. The truth was out, and there was no going back. And as I watched her squirm, I knew one thing for sure. She was going to regret everything. Every single second of this affair. And when it was over, she'd never be able to undo the damage she'd done. Her face twisted, the panic starting to show through her usual veneer of control. She pushed the phone back toward me with shaky hands, like she couldn't stand the evidence staring back at her. It was a mess of apologies and guilt, but I wasn't buying it. I'd been living in the lie for too long, and now that I had the truth, I didn't need her empty words. She swallowed hard, trying to gather herself. "Please, just hear me out," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I could hear the tremor in it, the fear. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to being caught. But I didn't want to hear her out. "Not now." "Hear you out?" I repeated, my voice low but steady. I could feel the anger building again, but this time, I kept it controlled. I wasn't going to lose it in front of her. She didn't deserve that kind of satisfaction. "You've had months to talk to me," I continued. "Months to come clean. And you think you can just talk your way out of it now?" I didn't wait for her to answer. I didn't need her to. "I've been watching you. Watching every little lie slip out of your mouth. And you know what? I'm done. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I cut her off before the words even left her lips. No, I said, my voice sharp. You don't get to explain this. Not anymore. I'm not interested in hearing your excuses. I've been a fool long enough. For a moment, she just stared at me. Her eyes were wide now, almost pleading, and that's when I saw it, the tiniest flicker of guilt. The kind of guilt that only comes when you've been caught red-handed and there's no way out. I never meant for it to go this far, she stammered, shaking her head. I was lonely, and I didn't know what to do. Lonely? She was lonely? I couldn't help but scoff. Lonely? You think sleeping with another guy makes you feel less lonely? You think betraying the person who's been there for you, who loves you, is going to fix whatever hole you've got inside you? Her eyes darted to the side, like she was trying to come up with something else to say, but she was lost. She knew it. I paced in front of her, trying to keep my emotions in check, but it wasn't easy. You know, you've got some nerve. You didn't even try to hide it. The late nights, the lies, the excuses. I watched you walk around like nothing was wrong, like you didn't have some other life behind my back. She winced, her face crumpling. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, can't we fix this? I'll do anything. I'll work on it, I swear. Anything. She thought she could just fix it? I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was all too much. This wasn't something you just fixed. She couldn't just undo what she'd done. I stopped pacing, and for a moment, just stared at her. She looked small now, vulnerable, maybe even scared. And that part of me, the part that still cared, wanted to soften. I wanted to tell her that I was sorry too, that I was willing to move on, that maybe we could salvage whatever was left. But I knew that was a lie. I knew I couldn't unsee the truth. I had to take control of this, or it would control me. I wasn't going to let her walk out of this scot-free. She didn't deserve that. I took a breath, my voice steady but cold. No, Sarah. We're done. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. I saw her flinch as if I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. I didn't feel sorry for her anymore. She had made her choices, and now she was going to pay the price. She stood up quickly, pushing her chair back, her face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and frustration. What do you want from me? What do you expect me to do? You're just going to throw everything away. Everything? What everything? The house, the dog, the life we built? Was that what she thought was on the line here? No. The thing that had been lost wasn't the house or the material stuff. It was the trust, the respect, the love. All of that was gone. No, Sarah, I said, my voice calmer now, but with a steel edge to it. What I want from you is for you to own it, to admit it. Admit that you've been lying to me for months. Admit that you threw away everything we had for some cheap thrill. And then maybe, just maybe, I'll consider anything else. Her face twisted in disgust. You think this is fun for me? You think I wanted to hurt you like this? You think I don't regret it? Regret? You regret it now that I found out? How convenient, I shot back, bitterness creeping into my voice. You didn't regret it when you were sneaking around behind my back, did you? She shook her head like she couldn't understand why I wasn't just forgiving her. She didn't get it. She couldn't. For the longest time, I stood there in silence, watching her, waiting for her to do or say something that would make me feel like I could somehow move past this. But it didn't come. Finally, I spoke, my words slow and deliberate. You want forgiveness? You want me to take you back? You don't get to decide that. I decide that. And I've already made my decision. We're done. You're going to leave. I watched her stumble back, the shock written all over her face. She opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. No. No more excuses. No more lies. Get out. And for the first time in months, I felt relief. I knew it was the right thing to do. She was never going to change. She'd never earned my forgiveness. The door closed behind her with a soft thud. And as I stood there, alone in the silence of the house we once shared, I knew that whatever came next, it would be better than this. Better than living a life where I was the fool, the one who was always second best. I was done. And now, finally, I was free. She left that night. No drama, no back and forth. Just a cold, silent exit. The look in her eyes as she grabbed her things. It wasn't the kind of look I expected. She didn't look angry. She didn't even look relieved. She just looked lost. It should have felt like a victory, but it didn't. I was glad she was gone. Hell, I was relieved. But it wasn't the clean break I thought it would be. There was no sense of triumph, no rush of satisfaction. Just a quiet emptiness, like the air had been sucked out of the room. For the first time in years, the house felt too quiet. I spent the next couple of days pacing around the place, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do now. I kept replaying the night over and over in my head, the confrontation, her leaving, the emptiness that followed. And honestly, I felt kind of numb. It was like my body didn't even know how to process what had happened. I spent most of the weekend alone. I didn't talk to anyone, not my friends, not my family. I didn't want to hear their opinions. I didn't want to hear you're better off or she didn't deserve you because deep down, I knew it was true. But knowing it and feeling it were two different things. So, I threw myself into distractions. I fixed things around the house, little repairs, a leaky faucet here, a busted drawer there. I didn't really care about the repairs. But focusing on something, anything, made the time go by faster. And every time I walked past that damn kitchen counter, I saw the spot where the paper with the phone number used to be. The reminder of how it all started. How I found out the truth. How I wasn't crazy after all. The reality of the affair still stung, but now it was more like a dull ache in my chest. I wasn't hurting as much anymore, but I wasn't sure what to do with the emptiness either. A few days after Sarah left, I ran into an old friend at the grocery store. His name's Ben. He was the guy I used to grab beers with before all the mess with Sarah started. I hadn't seen him in months, and I wasn't sure how to explain everything without going into details, so I kept it light. "Hey man, how's it going?" Ben said, his voice friendly but a little cautious. I gave him a tight smile. Getting through it. He gave me a look like he knew something was off but didn't push. "You good? I've been meaning to check in. Haven't seen you around much lately." "Yeah, just busy," I muttered, but I could tell he wasn't buying it. "Busy with what?" he asked, his eyebrows going up. "Come on man, spill it. You know you can talk to me." I took a breath, feeling a bit of that old frustration bubble up again. "Sarah and we're done." I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The tone in my voice made it clear. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, just stared at me like he was trying to read between the lines. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "She cheated on you, didn't she?" I didn't answer, but the look on my face must have been enough. He shook his head. "Man, I'm sorry. You don't deserve that. You never did." I just nodded, feeling that weight sit heavier on my chest. "Yeah, well, it is what it is." Ben didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. We both knew what had happened, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. We spent the next few minutes talking about random stuff, sports, work, small talk. But every now and then, I'd catch Ben's eye and see that pity there, and it reminded me that people could tell. They could see through the mask I'd been wearing. They could see the pain, even if I didn't want to acknowledge it. After a while, I left the store with a half-empty cart and a head full of thoughts. The whole conversation with Ben didn't really help, but it didn't make it worse either. Later that night, I sat down on the couch with a beer in hand, staring at the TV without really watching it. My phone buzzed a couple of times, but I didn't feel like looking at it. I knew it was probably Sarah. She'd been sending me these desperate texts ever since she left. Apologies. Excuses. More apologies. But I didn't want to read them. I didn't need to hear any more of her words. They were hollow now. They didn't matter. I thought about her for a second. What she was doing, where she was, who she was with. But I didn't let myself linger on it. That part of my life was over. She was gone. And I wasn't going to waste another second of my life wondering about her or him. The thing is, You don't realize how much someone can consume your thoughts until they're no longer around. It's like a vacuum, sucking out everything that used to matter. But I couldn't let that be my life anymore. I had to rebuild. Slowly, piece by piece. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this break me. Maybe Sarah thought I was weak. Maybe she thought I'd fall apart. But she didn't know me. She didn't know what I was capable of when I was pushed too far. I wasn't broken. I was just different now. And somehow that felt like the first real step forward. A week had passed since Sarah left, and honestly, the first few days were hell. My thoughts kept spiraling, running through everything she'd done, the lies, the betrayals. But slowly, the haze started to clear. It wasn't an immediate change. I wasn't out here celebrating or anything, but I wasn't drowning either. And that felt like progress. The house was quiet. Too quiet. But I began to settle into it, weirdly enough. It felt like I was getting to know myself again, like the noise of her presence, of her deceit, was gone, and I could finally breathe. I started filling up my days with things that didn't revolve around her. Things that didn't remind me of her and her lies. I called up Ben again, and we went to grab drinks one night. We didn't talk much about what happened with Sarah. I didn't need to. Ben could read me, knew what had happened without me having to explain. It was refreshing not to have to carry the burden of it for once. But as I sat there, listening to Ben talk about work and his life, something in the back of my mind shifted. I realized, maybe for the first time, how much I'd lost myself in her. All the years of putting her first, her needs, her wants. And in the process, I forgot about me. I forgot about what I wanted. That realization hit me like a punch to the gut, but it was also freeing. I had spent so much time trying to fix her, fix us, that I forgot I had to fix me first. I didn't need her. I didn't need to hang on to a relationship that was just built on lies and broken promises. I needed to rebuild myself, on my own terms. The next few weeks weren't easy, but they were a hell of a lot better than the mess I was living in before. I started picking up old hobbies again. I signed up for that hiking trip I'd been thinking about for years. I even started cooking more, something I had let slide when Sarah's taste took over the kitchen. It felt good. Damn good, actually. I didn't think about Sarah much. Of course, her name would come up here and there, but it didn't hurt like it used to. Every day felt like a small step toward getting back to the guy I used to be before all of her games, before I was consumed by the mess she'd created. But then something unexpected happened. It was one of those late afternoons, the sun setting just right, the kind of evening where the world feels like it's slowing down. I was in the backyard, cleaning out the shed, just a random Saturday chore, and I heard someone pull into the driveway. I didn't think much of it at first. Thought it was just a neighbor or maybe even Ben stopping by. But when I looked up, there she was. Sarah. Standing there in front of my house like nothing had changed. I felt my pulse quicken. I wasn't expecting this, wasn't ready for it. I'd told myself I was done, that I had moved on. But seeing her again, really seeing her again, was like a punch to the stomach. She was standing there in the same damn clothes she used to wear when she'd come home late, the same smile that always made me feel like everything was going to be okay. Except now, it didn't. She waved weakly, like I was supposed to be happy to see her. She looked different, tired, like she hadn't been sleeping well. But still, she stood there, like it was all just some misunderstanding, some phase she was going through. "Hey," she said, her voice hesitant. "Can we talk?" My gut reaction was to turn away, to slam the door in her face and never look back. But I didn't. I stood there for a second, feeling the anger welling up, but also something else. Something that felt like confusion. Did I still care? No, not anymore. But that didn't mean it didn't sting to see her standing there, acting like I was just supposed to forget everything. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice low and controlled. I wasn't going to let her drag me back into her mess. She looked like she was going to say something, but then paused. I know I messed up. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I messed up, and I'm paying for it. I get it now." For a second, I thought she was going to break down in front of me. The sincerity in her voice. It almost got to me. But then I remembered everything. Every lie. Every stolen moment. Every time I gave her another chance only to be disappointed again. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her to fix anything. I had already fixed myself. Sarah, I said, my voice calm but firm, you don't get to come back in here and make it all go away with an apology. You don't get to rewrite this. I've spent too long chasing something that was never real. And I'm done. She flinched like I slapped her. I could see it in her face. She didn't expect this. She probably thought she could just show up and win me back with some tearful speech. But I wasn't the same guy anymore. I'm sorry, she said again, her voice breaking. I don't know what else to say. You've already said enough, I replied, and I meant it. Goodbye, Sarah. And with that, I turned away from her, not giving her a chance to say another word. I didn't need to hear it. I didn't need to feel that part of me that still cared about her pull at me. It was over. I had already started moving forward. She was a chapter in my past now, one that didn't get to rewrite itself anymore. I walked back into the house, the door closing softly behind me, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt free. I was done looking back. Few months ago, I thought I was stuck. I thought I'd never be able to get past the mess Sarah had made of my life. But here I am, standing on the other side of it, looking back only long enough to realize how far I've come. After that day with Sarah, when I told her goodbye for good, I didn't let myself waver. She called a few times after that, sent some texts, apologies, regrets. It took everything in me to resist responding. But I didn't. I knew better now. I knew that any part of me that went back to her was just asking for more pain. And I didn't need that anymore. I wasn't the same guy I was when I first found out what she'd done. I was stronger now. More focused. I had my life back. I'm not gonna lie, there were times, especially in the quiet moments, when it felt like the weight of everything still lingered. The idea that I had spent so much time investing in a relationship that wasn't even real, that I had trusted someone who had betrayed me so completely, it hits you in waves. But every time that anger or sadness crept in, I let it pass. I didn't cling to it anymore. I let the emotions come, but I didn't let them control me. I was getting used to being alone. And honestly, it wasn't bad. It wasn't empty like I thought it would be. There were days when I remembered the good times with Sarah, when the memories were still fresh. But there were also days when I woke up and didn't think about her at all. I started rediscovering pieces of myself I'd lost. Things I liked, things I forgot about, things that weren't tied to her. I started working out again. A few friends dragged me out on a hike, and that first time, I almost forgot how good it felt to push myself physically. I started running in the mornings, getting that rush of energy back in my legs. I didn't care about impressing anyone anymore. It was just about feeling good for myself. It was something I could control, something I could own. I took trips. Little weekend getaways. I went to places I'd always wanted to visit but never had time for. No stress, no strings attached. Just me. My own company. And honestly, I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. One night, a couple of months after Sarah left, I found myself sitting at a bar, nursing a beer, just enjoying the atmosphere. It wasn't a big deal. I wasn't out there looking for anything. But then, she walked in. Her name was Jenna. She was a friend of a friend, someone I'd met a few times over the years. We'd always exchanged pleasantries but never really spent much time talking. But that night, she sat down next to me, and we started chatting. It wasn't anything intense. We just talked. About life. About whatever came to mind. It felt easy. I could tell she was interested. I could tell she liked me, and maybe I liked her too. But I wasn't rushing into anything. I wasn't chasing after someone else to fill a hole that Sarah had left. I didn't need that. Not anymore. But what I realized that night was something simple. I wasn't closed off to the idea of connection anymore. I wasn't scared to let someone new in. Jenna and I started hanging out more. Slowly at first. No pressure. just getting to know each other. And this time, I wasn't bringing the baggage from my past. I wasn't thinking about Sarah, about the lies, about the heartbreak. I was thinking about now, about what I was building. And that felt good. It felt like I was finally moving forward in a way I hadn't been able to for a long time. I don't know what'll happen with Jenna. It's too early to tell, and that's okay. What matters is that I'm open to the possibility of something real this time. Not a repeat of the lies and manipulation I went through before, but something grounded, something honest. And as for Sarah? She's still out there somewhere. I don't know what she's doing, and honestly, I don't care. I've heard rumors, but I stopped paying attention a long time ago. It's not my problem anymore. I've forgiven her in my own way, not because she deserves it, but because I deserve to move on. I'm not carrying that weight anymore. What I've learned through all of this is simple. Life doesn't wait for you to catch up. It keeps moving, with or without you. And sometimes, the only thing you can do is let go. Let go of the past. Let go of the pain. Let go of the person you thought you needed, and open yourself up to the possibility of something new. Because in the end, the only person who can rebuild your life is you. And that's exactly what I've done. I'm not who I was. I'm someone new. And I'm okay with that. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.